What happens when an act of hateful vandalism against a beloved garden ignites a battle for justice, transforming a quiet neighborhood into a stage for a powerful fight against racism and for environmental protection? The morning sun, a gentle giant, stretched its golden fingers across the small, neatly kept houses of Willow Creek. Dew clung to the vibrant green leaves, sparkling like 1,000 tiny diamonds. But the true jewel of Willow Creek wasn't a house, nor a car, nor even the freshly painted fire hydrant at the corner of Elm and Maple. The jewel was Ms. Evelyn Reed's garden. Ms. Reed, a woman etched with the wisdom of 80 years, stood amidst her creation, a smile playing on her lips. Her hands, gnarled but nimble, gently caressed the velvety petals of a crimson rose, its fragrance a heady mix of sweetness and earth. The garden wasn't merely a collection of plants. It was a vibrant tapestry woven with love, patience, and a deep understanding of the earth's rhythm. Towering sunflowers, their faces turned towards the sun like eager children, stood guard over a riot of color. Lush lavender bushes released their calming scent, mingling with the sharp fragrance of rosemary and the sweet perfume of honeysuckle. Tomatoes, plump and red, hung heavy on their vines, promising a summer of delicious meals. The air hummed with the industrious buzz of bees, drawn to the abundance of nectar. Butterflies, their wings painted with nature's artistry, danced from flower to flower, a silent ballet of life. Ms. Reed's garden wasn't just beautiful, it was bountiful. She shared her harvest generously with her neighbors, her baskets overflowing with fresh vegetables and herbs. Mrs. Henderson, next door, received a generous helping of zucchini every week, enough to make her famous zucchini bread. Mr. Rodriguez, across the street, always received a bouquet of fragrant herbs for his grilling. Even young Timmy, who lived 2 houses down, was given a small pumpkin each fall to carve into a jack-o'-lantern. The garden was a testament to Ms. Reed's dedication and love for the land. She knew the soil intimately, understanding its needs and responding to its whispers. She spoke to her plants, her voice a gentle murmur that seemed to coax them to grow taller, stronger, and more vibrant. She knew when to water, when to prune, when to let nature take its course. It was a symbiotic relationship, a dance between woman and nature, a testament to the power of nurturing and respect. The garden was also a source of immense pride for Ms. Reed. It was a reflection of her spirit, strong, resilient, and full of life. She had planted the first seeds decades ago, when Willow Creek was a much quieter, less developed place. Over the years, the garden had grown and evolved, mirroring her own journey through life. It was a living testament to her enduring spirit, a vibrant green oasis in the ever-changing landscape of Willow Creek. The garden wasn't just Ms. Reed's sanctuary. It was the heart of the neighborhood. Children played hide-and-seek amongst the tall sunflowers, their laughter echoing through the fragrant air. Neighbors gathered on Ms. Reed's porch, sharing stories and sipping sweet tea, the scent of lavender and honeysuckle weaving its way into their conversations. The garden was a place of peace, a place of community, a place where the simple joys of life were celebrated. It was a vibrant, living testament to the power of nature, the strength of community, and the enduring spirit of one remarkable woman. And it was, without a doubt, the envy of Willow Creek. Everyone admired Ms. Reed's green thumb, her dedication, and the sheer beauty of her garden. It was a place of solace, a place of beauty, and a place that brought the community together. It was, in every sense of the word, a blooming garden. Arthur Croft lived next door to Ms. Reed. He wasn't a bad man, not exactly. He just didn't like change. He didn't like things that were different. And Ms. Reed's garden, a riot of color and life, was profoundly different from everything else on their otherwise uniformly beige street. His house, a modest ranch with peeling paint and a perpetually unkempt lawn, stood in stark contrast to the vibrant spectacle next door. Arthur's lawn was a patchy expanse of brown and yellow, a reflection of his own withered spirit. He'd lived in Willow Creek for over 40 years, and in those 40 years, he'd seen the neighborhood slowly but surely change. New families moved in, families of different backgrounds, different cultures, different everything. He grumbled about the noise, the unfamiliar smells of foreign cuisines wafting from open windows, the unfamiliar languages spoken on the street. But he'd mostly kept his complaints to himself, a low simmer of discontent bubbling beneath the surface. Until Ms. Reed's garden. It wasn't just the beauty of the garden that bothered him. It was the attention it drew. The constant stream of visitors, neighbors stopping to admire the flowers, children giggling as they chased butterflies. It all felt like a personal affront. It was a stark reminder of everything he felt was changing, everything he felt was being lost. He saw Ms. Reed's garden as a symbol of everything he resented: vibrancy, diversity, and progress. The garden, he believed, was an invasion of his quiet, predictable world. It was too loud, too bright, too alive. He found himself staring at it from his window, a knot of resentment tightening in his chest. The vibrant colors seemed to mock his own drab existence. The sweet fragrance is a reminder of the vibrancy he lacked. He tried to ignore it at first, to bury his discomfort beneath layers of denial. He'd tell himself it was just a garden, that it didn't matter. But the garden's beauty was relentless, its vibrancy impossible to ignore. It was a constant, nagging reminder of everything he feared and despised. The joyful chatter of children playing amongst the flowers grated on his nerves, the laughter a mocking soundtrack to his own quiet misery. Arthur's resentment festered, growing into a poisonous weed in the barren landscape of his soul. He started to see Ms. Reed not as a kind, elderly woman, but as an intruder, a symbol of everything he felt was wrong with the changing world. He convinced himself that she was somehow responsible for the changes he so vehemently opposed. Her garden, in his twisted logic, was the catalyst for everything that made him uncomfortable. He began to watch her, observing her every move in the garden. He noted her routine, the time she watered her plants, the time she pruned her roses, the time she shared her bounty with her neighbors. His observations weren't born out of admiration, but of a growing obsession, a twisted fascination with the object of his resentment. He saw her happiness, her contentment, and it fueled his anger. He wanted it gone. He wanted her gone. He wanted the vibrant colors, the sweet fragrances, the joyful laughter. He wanted it all to disappear. And he began to formulate a plan to silence the vibrant symphony of life that was Ms. Reed's garden, a plan born from hate and fueled by fear. The seeds of his resentment had taken root, and they were about to blossom into something ugly. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows across Willow Creek. Ms. Evelyn Reed was tending to her prize-winning dahlias, their petals a breathtaking array of crimson, orange, and yellow. She hummed a soft tune, her fingers gently brushing against the delicate blooms. The air was filled with the sweet scent of honeysuckle and the gentle buzz of bees. It was a perfect summer afternoon, a picture of idyllic peace. From the corner of her eye, Ms. Reed noticed movement. Mr. Croft, her neighbor, was emerging from behind his dilapidated shed, carrying a large, burlap sack. He was usually a creature of habit, sticking to his routine of sitting on his porch, scowling at the world. Seeing him up and about, and carrying something so large, was unusual. He moved with a furtive haste, his eyes darting around, as if he expected to be caught. Ms. Reed watched him approach her garden, her initial curiosity morphing into a growing unease. He stopped by her prize-winning sunflowers, their towering stalks reaching towards the sun like hopeful arms. With a swift, brutal movement, he began to hack at their stems with a rusty garden trowel he'd pulled from the sack. The sunflowers, once standing tall and proud, now lay on the ground, their vibrant yellow faces drooping in defeat. Ms. Reed gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She called out to him, her voice a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mr. Croft? What are you doing?" He didn't respond, his movements growing more frantic. He continued his destructive spree, targeting her vibrant zinnias, her fragrant lavender bushes, and her plump tomatoes. He ripped and tore at the plants, his actions fueled by a rage that seemed to consume him. The burlap sack, Ms. Reed now noticed, was filled with what appeared to be dry brown soil. He moved with a disturbing efficiency, methodically destroying everything in his path. The once vibrant garden was rapidly transforming into a scene of devastation. Ms. Reed watched in horror, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't understand his actions, his sudden outburst of violence. She had always been kind to him, sharing her harvest, offering a friendly wave. Why was he doing this? As he moved on to her rose bushes, meticulously uprooting each one, Ms. Reed's initial shock gave way to a burning anger. She tried to approach him again, but he turned, his face contorted in a grimace of hatred. He didn't speak, but his eyes, filled with a venomous rage, sent a chill down her spine. He continued his destructive work, his movements growing increasingly frenzied. Finally, he approached the base of her beloved rose bushes and began to pour the contents of the burlap sack onto the soil. The dry, brown earth seemed to absorb the moisture, leaving behind a powdery residue. Ms. Reed felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She knew instinctively that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just vandalism. This was something far more sinister. As Mr. Croft finished his destructive work and hurried back to his house, leaving behind a trail of destruction, Ms. Reed stood amidst the ruins of her garden, her mind reeling from the shocking display of hate and violence. The idyllic peace of the afternoon was shattered, replaced by a chilling sense of dread. She had witnessed something terrible, something that would forever change the landscape of her life and the heart of her community. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold dread that settled deep in Ms. Evelyn Reed's bones. The sun, once a source of warmth and comfort, now felt harsh and unforgiving, its rays highlighting the devastation wrought upon her beloved garden. She stood amidst the wreckage, her hands trembling, her heart heavy with a grief that went beyond the loss of plants. This was a violation, a deliberate act of malice that had struck at the very core of her being. She knelt down, her gnarled fingers gently probing the soil. It felt different, drier than usual, almost powdery to the touch. A strange, acrid smell hung in the air, a scent she couldn't quite place but that instinctively felt wrong, toxic. A wave of nausea washed over her, and she stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. With trembling hands, she pulled out a few wilted tomato plants. Their leaves were brittle and brown, their stems snapped and lifeless. She examined the roots, finding them shriveled and decayed. This wasn't simply the result of neglect or a lack of water. This was something far more sinister. A chilling realization dawned on her. Her soil had been poisoned. The full weight of Mr. Croft's actions crashed down on her. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a deliberate act of destruction, a calculated attempt to ruin her garden, to destroy the source of her joy and pride. The anger that had simmered beneath the surface now erupted, a burning inferno that consumed her. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of grief, anger, and betrayal. She walked through the ravaged garden, each step a painful reminder of the beauty that had been so cruelly taken from her. The sunflowers, once towering symbols of hope and resilience, now lay broken and lifeless. The vibrant zinnias, their petals once bursting with color, were now withered and brown. The lavender bushes, their calming scent once a soothing balm, were reduced to lifeless stalks. The realization that her garden, her sanctuary, her lifelong passion, was irrevocably damaged, sent a wave of despair washing over her. It wasn't just the loss of the plants. It was the loss of the joy they brought her, the sense of community they fostered, the connection to the earth they represented. It was the loss of a part of herself. She sank onto a weathered bench, her body racked with sobs. The vibrant colors of her garden, once a source of joy and pride, were now replaced by the bleak monochrome of destruction. The sweet fragrances, once a soothing balm, were replaced by the acrid smell of poison. The laughter of children playing amongst the flowers, once a source of comfort, was replaced by the silence of devastation. The anger, however, was a powerful force, pushing back against the despair. It fueled her determination, igniting a fire in her spirit. This wasn't the end. This was a turning point. She wouldn't let Mr. Croft's act of hate destroy her. She would fight back, not just for her garden, but for the principles of justice and respect that had been so brutally violated. The poison in the soil might have killed her plants, but it couldn't kill her spirit. Her garden might be destroyed, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She would rebuild, she would restore, and she would ensure that justice would be served. The seeds of resilience had been planted, and they would grow stronger than ever before. Marcus arrived at his grandmother's house late in the afternoon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the usually vibrant garden. He'd received a frantic call earlier that day, his grandmother's voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. He'd immediately dropped everything. A high-stakes environmental case was momentarily forgotten and rushed to her side. The sight that greeted him was devastating. The once lush garden, a vibrant tapestry of colors and life, was now a scene of utter destruction. Broken stalks and wilted leaves lay scattered across the ground, a testament to a brutal act of vandalism. The air, usually filled with the sweet scent of flowers, now carried a strange, acrid odor. His grandmother sat on a weathered bench, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He rushed to her side, kneeling beside her and gently taking her hand. Her touch was cold, her body trembling. He felt a surge of protective anger, a fierce determination to shield her from further pain. "Granny," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "what happened?" Ms. Reed looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, her face etched with a grief that went beyond the loss of plants. She recounted the events of the day, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. She described how she had witnessed Mr. Croft's destructive spree, his methodical destruction of her beloved garden, and the chilling realization that he had poisoned the soil. Marcus listened intently, his heart filled with a mixture of rage and sorrow. He knew his grandmother's garden wasn't just a collection of plants. It was an extension of her soul, a reflection of her spirit, a source of immense joy and pride. To see it destroyed in such a cruel and deliberate manner was deeply upsetting. He stood up, his anger now a burning fire in his belly. He surveyed the damage, his eyes scanning the ravaged garden. He noticed the broken stems, the wilted leaves, the strange, acrid smell clinging to the soil. He knew instinctively that this wasn't just vandalism. It was a hate crime, a deliberate act of malice intended to cause pain and suffering. He was an environmental lawyer, a man who dedicated his life to protecting the natural world. He'd fought against polluters, developers, and corporations that disregarded environmental laws. But this was different. This was personal. This was an attack not just on the environment, but on his grandmother, on her spirit, on her dignity. His initial reaction was a surge of protective anger, a desire to confront Mr. Croft and make him pay for his actions. But he knew that wasn't enough. He needed to do more. He needed to use his skills, his expertise, his position to bring justice to his grandmother. He would not only make Mr. Croft accountable for his actions, but also use this opportunity to raise awareness about hate crimes and the importance of protecting the environment. He took a deep breath, composing himself. He looked at his grandmother, his eyes filled with determination. "Granny," he said, his voice firm and resolute, "we're going to fix this. We're going to make him pay for what he's done." He knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but he was ready to fight. He would use his skills and resources to ensure that justice was served, not just for his grandmother, but for all those who had suffered from acts of hate and environmental destruction. The fight had begun, and he was ready to lead the charge. He would make sure that this act of hatred would not go unpunished. He would ensure that Mr. Croft would face the consequences of his actions. And he would make sure that his grandmother's garden would bloom again, stronger and more beautiful than ever before. Marcus's methodical nature took over. The raw emotion of the previous hours gave way to a cool, calculating focus. He knew that to bring Mr. Croft to justice, he needed evidence, concrete, irrefutable proof of his malicious actions. He started with photographs. He meticulously documented the damage, capturing the broken stems, the wilted leaves, the poisoned soil. Each image was a testament to the destruction, a piece of evidence in the case he was building. He then moved on to the soil itself. He collected samples, carefully labeling and storing them in airtight containers. He knew he'd need to have the soil tested to determine the exact nature of the poison used, and to prove that it was indeed a deliberate act of poisoning, not simply neglect or disease. This would require the expertise of a soil scientist, a professional who could analyze the samples and provide a definitive answer. Next, he turned to the witnesses. He knew that several neighbors had seen Mr. Croft in the garden that day. He started with Mrs. Henderson, who lived next door. She confirmed seeing Mr. Croft carrying a burlap sack, his movements furtive and hurried. She hadn't seen exactly what he'd done, but she'd noticed his unusual behavior and the subsequent destruction of Ms. Reed's garden. He then spoke to Mr. Rodriguez, who lived across the street. He corroborated Mrs. Henderson's account, adding that he'd seen Mr. Croft leaving the garden shortly after the destruction began. He'd noticed the unusual state of the plants and the strange smell emanating from the soil. He'd been too far away to see exactly what Mr. Croft had done, but he had a clear view of him leaving the scene. Each interview provided a piece of the puzzle, adding to the growing body of evidence against Mr. Croft. Marcus meticulously documented each conversation, noting the time, the place, and the specifics of each witness's account. He was building a solid case, a narrative that painted a clear picture of Mr. Croft's malicious intent. He also took the time to speak to young Timmy, who lived 2 houses down. Timmy, though young, had a keen eye for detail. He'd seen Mr. Croft in the garden, and he described seeing him pour something from a sack onto the ground. He couldn't identify the substance, but his simple account added another layer to the case. His interviews weren't just about gathering facts. They were also about building community support. He learned that Mr. Croft's prejudice wasn't limited to Ms. Reed. He'd been openly hostile to other neighbors, particularly those from different cultural backgrounds. He'd made snide remarks, spread rumors, and generally created a climate of fear and intimidation. This information, while not directly related to the vandalism, would be crucial in demonstrating a pattern of behavior, a history of prejudice and hostility. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Willow Creek, Marcus felt a sense of growing confidence. He had gathered substantial evidence, enough to build a strong case against Mr. Croft. He had the photographs, the soil samples, and the testimonies of multiple witnesses. He also had a growing sense of community support, a shared outrage at Mr. Croft's actions. He was ready to move to the next stage, to use his legal expertise to bring Mr. Croft to justice, and to ensure that his grandmother's garden would bloom again. The evidence was meticulously gathered, the pieces of the puzzle carefully assembled. He was ready. News of the vandalism spread quickly through Willow Creek. The tight-knit community, usually characterized by its quiet harmony, was now abuzz with a shared sense of outrage and indignation. Ms. Reed's garden wasn't just her own. It was a symbol of the neighborhood's collective spirit, a vibrant testament to the beauty of community and the joy of shared experiences. Its destruction was felt by everyone. The outpouring of support was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors brought over food, offering comfort and solidarity. Mrs. Henderson, her eyes brimming with tears, brought a warm pot of her famous zucchini bread, a small gesture of comfort in the face of such devastation. Mr. Rodriguez arrived with a basket of fresh herbs, a symbol of resilience and hope. Even young Timmy, clutching a small, hand-drawn picture of a sunflower, offered his silent support. The shared grief and anger transcended differences in background and culture. People from all walks of life came together, united by their shared sense of injustice. They shared stories of their own encounters with Mr. Croft's prejudice, tales of snide remarks, subtle insults, and blatant acts of hostility. It became clear that Ms. Reed wasn't the only victim of his hateful behavior. Mrs. Garcia, a recent immigrant from Mexico, recounted how Mr. Croft had repeatedly complained about the smell of her cooking, his words laced with thinly veiled racism. Mr. Lee, an elderly Asian man, shared how Mr. Croft had spread false rumors about his business, attempting to undermine his livelihood. These stories, shared in hushed tones, revealed a pattern of behavior, a history of prejudice and discrimination that had been simmering beneath the surface of Willow Creek for far too long. The shared experiences fostered a sense of unity, a collective determination to confront Mr. Croft's hateful actions. The community wasn't just offering sympathy. They were offering solidarity, a powerful force that transcended individual grievances. They were standing together, united against hate and injustice. The outpouring of support extended beyond simple gestures of kindness. Neighbors offered to help Ms. Reed rebuild her garden, their offers ranging from practical assistance to emotional support. Some offered to donate plants, others offered their time and expertise. The collective effort was a powerful demonstration of community spirit, a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The shared outrage against Mr. Croft's actions became a catalyst for change. The quiet harmony of Willow Creek was replaced by a collective determination to confront prejudice and injustice. The community, once divided by differences, was now united by a shared sense of purpose. They were no longer just neighbors. They were allies, united in their fight against hate and in their determination to create a more just and equitable community. The destruction of Ms. Reed's garden had inadvertently planted the seeds of a powerful movement, a collective effort to overcome prejudice and build a more harmonious community. The support wasn't just emotional. It was practical, tangible, and deeply meaningful. It was the kind of support that could help Ms. Reed heal, and it was the kind of support that could help bring Mr. Croft to justice. Marcus, armed with the photographic evidence, soil samples, witness testimonies, and a growing sense of community support, decided it was time to act. He wasn't just going to let Mr. Croft get away with his act of vandalism. He was going to make him pay. This wasn't just about the destruction of his grandmother's garden. It was about justice, about accountability, and about sending a clear message that hate crimes would not be tolerated. He spent days meticulously preparing the lawsuit, poring over legal documents, consulting with experts, and strategizing his approach. He knew he had a strong case, but he also knew that he needed to present it in a way that would resonate with the court and the community. He wasn't just seeking monetary compensation. He was seeking justice. The lawsuit was filed against Mr. Croft, alleging not only vandalism, but also a hate crime. The legal arguments were carefully constructed, drawing on both environmental law and hate crime legislation. The evidence was meticulously presented, each piece carefully documented and explained. The photographs depicted the destruction of the garden, the soil samples provided scientific proof of poisoning, and the witness testimonies painted a clear picture of Mr. Croft's malicious intent. The lawsuit also highlighted the broader context of Mr. Croft's actions, drawing attention to his history of prejudice and hostility towards his neighbors. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of behavior, a manifestation of deep-seated hatred and intolerance. Marcus argued that Mr. Croft's actions weren't simply an act of vandalism. They were a hate crime, a deliberate attempt to intimidate and displace Ms. Reed because of her race. The filing of the lawsuit sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. While many residents had been aware of Mr. Croft's prejudice, few had anticipated such a bold and decisive action. The lawsuit was more than just a legal battle. It was a statement, a declaration that the community would not tolerate hate and injustice. It was a moment of reckoning, a turning point in the neighborhood's history. The news of the lawsuit spread beyond Willow Creek, attracting the attention of local media outlets and civil rights organizations. Marcus's actions were praised as a courageous stand against hate, a powerful example of how individuals could use the legal system to fight for justice. The case became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. The lawsuit wasn't just about monetary compensation. It was about sending a message, a clear and unequivocal statement that hate crimes would not be tolerated. It was about holding Mr. Croft accountable for his actions and creating a precedent that would deter future acts of hate. It was about creating a more just and equitable community, a place where everyone felt safe, respected, and valued. The filing of the lawsuit marked a significant turning point, transforming a personal tragedy into a powerful symbol of community resistance and a fight for justice. The legal battle had begun, and the community stood united behind Ms. Reed and her grandson. The courtroom was packed. Word of the trial had spread far beyond Willow Creek. attracting not only residents but also representatives from civil rights organizations and members of the media. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, a palpable sense of tension hanging in the air. Ms. Evelyn Reed sat in the front row, her hand clasped tightly in Marcus's. Her eyes, though still bearing the marks of sorrow, held a flicker of hope. Marcus, impeccably dressed, stood before the judge, his demeanor calm and confident. He began by presenting the photographic evidence, each image a stark reminder of the destruction wrought upon his grandmother's garden. The courtroom fell silent as the images were projected onto a large screen, the vibrant colors of the once lush garden now replaced by the bleak monochrome of devastation. He then called Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Rodriguez, and young Timmy to the stand. Their testimonies, though varying in detail, painted a consistent picture of Mr. Croft's actions. They described seeing him in the garden, his furtive movements, his destructive behavior, and the strange substance he poured onto the soil. Their words, delivered with honesty and conviction, resonated with the jury. The soil samples, meticulously analyzed by a leading soil scientist, provided irrefutable proof of poisoning. The expert witness testified to the presence of a highly toxic substance, confirming that the damage to Ms. Reed's garden was not accidental, but a deliberate act of destruction. His testimony was clear, concise, and devastating to Mr. Croft's defense. Then came the most difficult part, presenting evidence of Mr. Croft's hateful motivations. Marcus called upon several neighbors who testified to Mr. Croft's history of prejudice and hostility. Their accounts, though painful to hear, painted a disturbing picture of a man consumed by hate, a man who targeted those he perceived as different. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as Mr. Croft's blatant racism was laid bare. Mr. Croft's defense was weak, unconvincing, and ultimately exposed his bigotry. He attempted to deny his actions, claiming that he'd merely been weeding his own property and that the damage to Ms. Reed's garden was accidental. However, his attempts to deflect responsibility were easily countered by the overwhelming evidence presented by Marcus. His attempts to downplay his actions only served to further expose his prejudice and malice. During cross-examination, Marcus skillfully exposed the inconsistencies in Mr. Croft's testimony, highlighting his blatant racism and his attempts to evade responsibility. Mr. Croft's anger and frustration grew with each question, his attempts to maintain composure crumbling under the weight of the evidence. His racism, previously hidden beneath a veneer of civility, was now laid bare for all to see. As the trial progressed, the courtroom's atmosphere shifted. The initial tension was replaced by a growing sense of outrage, a shared disgust at Mr. Croft's actions and his blatant disregard for the law. The jury, initially composed and neutral, seemed increasingly affected by the evidence presented, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, anger, and sadness. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. Mr. Croft's guilt was clear. The trial was not merely a legal proceeding. It was a powerful indictment of hate, a stark reminder of the consequences of prejudice and intolerance. The evidence was compelling, the testimonies were powerful, and the truth was undeniable. The stage was set for justice. Following the compelling testimony of the neighbors, Marcus called upon Dr. Anya Sharma, a renowned environmental scientist and expert in soil toxicology. Dr. Sharma, a woman known for her unwavering commitment to environmental justice, took the stand with a quiet authority that commanded attention. She was not just an expert witness. She was a powerful advocate for the environment and a staunch opponent of environmental racism. Dr. Sharma began by explaining the long-term effects of the poison found in Ms. Reed's soil. She detailed the harmful effects on plant life, explaining how the toxic substance not only killed existing plants, but also rendered the soil infertile for years to come. She described the complex chemical processes involved, using clear and concise language that was easily understood by the jury. She went on to explain the broader implications of soil contamination, emphasizing the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the devastating impact of environmental pollution. She spoke of the potential harm to wildlife, the disruption of natural processes, and the long-term consequences for the environment. Her words carried the weight of scientific authority, painting a sobering picture of the damage caused by Mr. Croft's actions. Dr. Sharma then shifted her focus to the issue of environmental justice, emphasizing the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on marginalized communities. She explained how communities of color, and particularly elderly individuals, were often disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and degradation. She cited numerous studies and statistics, highlighting the systemic inequalities that made these communities particularly vulnerable. She connected Mr. Croft's actions to this broader context, arguing that his deliberate poisoning of Ms. Reed's garden was not an isolated incident, but a manifestation of a larger problem: environmental racism. She emphasized that Mr. Croft's actions weren't simply an act of vandalism. They were a deliberate attempt to harm Ms. Reed, an elderly black woman, and to destroy her connection to the land. This was not just about a garden. It was about a pattern of systemic oppression. Dr. Sharma's testimony resonated deeply with the jury. Her expertise lent credibility to Marcus's arguments, while her passionate advocacy for environmental justice brought a powerful emotional dimension to the case. She didn't just present scientific facts. She told a story of injustice, oppression, and the urgent need for change. Her words were not simply a recitation of data. They were a call to action. Her testimony extended beyond the immediate facts of the case, placing Mr. Croft's actions within a larger framework of environmental racism and social injustice. She highlighted the systemic inequalities that made marginalized communities particularly vulnerable to environmental hazards. She emphasized the importance of environmental justice, the need to protect vulnerable populations from environmental harm, and the responsibility of individuals and institutions to address the root causes of environmental inequality. The courtroom was silent as Dr. Sharma concluded her testimony, her words hanging in the air, a powerful testament to the importance of environmental justice and the devastating consequences of hate. The impact of her testimony was profound, not just on the legal proceedings, but also on the hearts and minds of everyone present. The jury deliberated for several hours, the silence in the courtroom broken only by the occasional rustle of papers or the hushed whispers of spectators. The tension was palpable, a thick blanket of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Ms. Reed sat beside Marcus, her hand clasped tightly in his, her eyes fixed on the jury box. The weight of the past weeks, the emotional toll of the trial, seemed to press down on her. Yet, there was a flicker of hope, a quiet determination in her gaze. Finally, the jury foreman stood, his face impassive. He announced the verdict: guilty. The word hung in the air, a single syllable that carried the weight of justice. A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom, a wave of emotion that washed over the spectators. Ms. Reed's shoulders slumped slightly, a release of tension after weeks of stress and uncertainty. A single tear rolled down her cheek, a tear not of sadness, but of relief. The judge then addressed the court, outlining the consequences of Mr. Croft's actions. He detailed the legal ramifications of the vandalism and the hate crime charges, emphasizing the severity of Mr. Croft's actions and the need for appropriate punishment. He acknowledged the emotional distress caused to Ms. Reed and the broader community, highlighting the importance of protecting vulnerable populations from acts of hate and discrimination. The judge's sentencing was firm but measured. Mr. Croft was ordered to pay significant monetary damages to Ms. Reed, covering not only the cost of restoring her garden, but also compensation for the emotional distress he had caused. He was also sentenced to community service, requiring him to work with local environmental organizations and participate in diversity and sensitivity training. The judge emphasized the importance of rehabilitation and restorative justice, hoping that Mr. Croft would use this opportunity to reflect on his actions and make amends for the harm he had caused. The legal ramifications extended beyond the immediate consequences for Mr. Croft. The case set a precedent, sending a clear message that hate crimes and acts of environmental vandalism would not be tolerated. It served as a powerful reminder of the importance of protecting vulnerable communities from discrimination and environmental harm. The case became a rallying point for advocates of environmental justice, highlighting the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on marginalized communities. The verdict was more than just a legal outcome. It was a victory for justice, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. It was a powerful statement, a clear message that hate crimes would not go unpunished and that justice would be served. It was a victory for Ms. Reed, for her community, and for all those who had suffered from acts of hate and discrimination. The verdict was a triumph not just for Ms. Reed, but for the entire community of Willow Creek, and a beacon of hope for those fighting for environmental justice and against hate crimes everywhere. The legal battle was won, but the fight for justice and equality continued. With the legal battle won, the community of Willow Creek rallied around Ms. Reed to restore her beloved garden. The monetary compensation awarded to her was used not only to replace the destroyed plants, but also to enhance the garden, making it even more vibrant and beautiful than before. The community's collective effort was a testament to their resilience and their unwavering support for Ms. Reed. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers from across the town volunteered their time and expertise. They tilled the soil, removing the traces of the poison and enriching it with nutrient-rich compost. They planted new seeds and seedlings, carefully selecting plants that would thrive in the local climate. They weeded, watered, and nurtured the young plants, their collective effort a powerful symbol of unity and hope. The restoration of the garden was a community project, a shared undertaking that brought people together, transcending differences in background and culture. It was a process of healing, a collective effort to repair the damage caused by Mr. Croft's hateful actions. The garden, once a symbol of division, was now a symbol of unity, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. As the garden began to flourish, so did the community. The incident, though painful, had become a catalyst for positive change. It had forced the community to confront its own prejudices and biases, leading to a greater understanding and tolerance among its residents. Mr. Croft's actions, though reprehensible, had inadvertently brought people together, fostering a sense of shared purpose and collective responsibility. The garden became a symbol of renewal, a vibrant testament to the power of resilience. It was a place where people could gather, sharing stories and celebrating the simple joys of life. It was a space for healing, a place where the wounds of the past could begin to mend. The children of Willow Creek once again played amidst the flowers, their laughter echoing through the air, a joyful symphony of life and hope. The incident also led to a renewed focus on environmental justice within the community. Residents organized workshops and educational programs, raising awareness about the importance of protecting the environment and the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on marginalized communities. They worked together to create a more sustainable and equitable community, a place where everyone felt safe, respected, and valued. The transformation of the garden mirrored the transformation of the community. The once ravaged landscape was now a vibrant tapestry of color and life, a testament to the power of resilience and the triumph of justice. The incident, though painful, had ultimately brought the community closer together, fostering greater understanding, tolerance, and a shared commitment to creating a more just and equitable world. The garden bloomed again, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of community. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, beauty and hope can prevail. The garden, once a symbol of hate, was now a beacon of unity and a testament to the triumph of justice.